we're all set. Go for it.
Okay. So welcome everybody. Again, I'm really excited about sharing this morning. But I'm in Chicago, and so Anthony, I can kind of feel your pain like a little bit, just an hour difference from Boston. But I was so confused this morning about, well, am I an hour ahead of time? Am I an hour behind? What time am I supposed to start? So I finally got it together, and we're ready to go. Just to say a quick word too is that I have my notes on my phone, which is over. So if I look over a lot, that's because I'm looking at my notes on my phone. So this morning, as you know, we're going to be talking about strengths, and this is really just a little taste of the subject. I just want to say that right away because there's so much that can be we can really delve into. But this morning is just a taste. And also it's going to be somewhat interactive. Even though we're doing this kind of virtually, I really want some of this to be a kind of a conversation. And the truth is that this isn't about sort of me telling you who you are, or even the strengths assessment telling you who you are, but it's giving you an opportunity to really explore more of who God's made you to be, and to be very intentional about that, and to take responsibility for that yourself, and for getting out all of it, all you can out of the assessment. So let's go. So today we're going to talk about why discovering your strengths is a helpful tool, how to think about applying your strengths to your life. We're going to talk about just a little exercise with that. We're going to look at some particular themes or strengths. Some of you sent me your strengths, and so I took a look at those. And at the end of our time, we're going to talk some about those specific things that you sent me. So if you sent me something, I'll be talking about that. And then at the end, I'm going to talk about just a few little resources, some of which you've already begun to access. Okay, so let me start by saying another couple of words about this, is that we all we want to be effective. I mean, I myself, I just was longing to know more about kind of how I was wired, how I, why I did the things I did, what I did well. And so we all really want that. We want to be effective, and we want to unpack what God has given us. And one thing that Tom has said a lot is that the greatest gift that God has given us is ourselves. The greatest gift God's given you is you. And so to be able to unpack that gift, to talk about strengths is a way of kind of unpacking that gift so that you can be a blessing. The thing that I think about is, gifts are like, or strengths are like tools that we have. And so you want to know what kind of tool you have. So if you want to hammer a nail down, why use a stiletto heel to do that when you could get a hammer to do it? The stiletto is great for wearing on your foot. The hammer is great and precise for hammering down the nail. So this is about finding out, are you a hammer or are you a stiletto? Do you know people who are hammers? Do you need to get them? But really understand how God has designed you so that you can fully inhabit the purpose that you have, that He's given you. So a little bit about my story. So I was somewhat skeptical about these kinds of assessments. I'm always thinking, this is not really accurate. I don't really know how this works. And maybe you felt that way too. So, but what happened was, at my job, they had these consultants come in and do a strengths conference, really, for our entire department. And it was really awesome. It was awesome. And first, we all took our individual assessments. And when mine came back, I looked at it and I was like, oh my gosh, this is really who I am. I had an idea about that. But then when they started going over each of the strengths, they did that in like a 2-day workshop. They went over each of the strengths and they gave more insight into it. And I was like, wow, this really is speaking to who I am. And then after that, they had a coach do an individual one-on-one with us, a coaching session, where we even went in deeper. And I was almost in tears because I felt so, just so known, I guess. And it really affirmed for me a lot of things. And it helped me to better embrace kind of who I am. And there were some strengths too that I didn't really understand, and I kind of devalued them. But then when I talked to this person and I really, I was coached in that way, it shed a whole new light on it. And so just a quick example of that is 2 of my strengths are developer and ideation. And I noticed that was, a lot of people had developers as strengths that sent me. And other people had ideation also as a strength. So that was a strength that I had. Those were 2 strengths that I had. And I realized that I love sitting down with people and sort of hearing their stories and being able to see just these little shoots of potential in them. And I loved seeing that. But so that was sort of my developer strength. I'd see this potential in them and I want to look for ways to kind of develop that. But my ideation strength would kick in and I would get ideas as I listened to them. I would get ideas about how they could take next steps in their lives. So doing the StrengthsFinder, I always kind of knew I liked to do that, but doing the StrengthsFinder helped me to be more intentional about that. And for me to be more intentional about putting myself in spaces and environments where I can be effective. And so anyway, and when I would sit down with people, they would feel very seen and known because I was able to use those particular strengths. But I felt seen and known too by God. I said, wow, Lord, this is how you designed me. And this is a way that I really can be effective in the work that I do. So you see this real happy face here on this picture. It's because this is a picture of when I was doing just that. I was able to really listen to people and get ideas about how they could make their lives better. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. And just, I'm kind of running through this piece, but we're going to have some time when we're going to be sharing together. So I don't want to go too long without hearing your voices. So why strengths? So just to go through these 5 things. First, to talk about strengths kind of gives us a common vocabulary. So we understand, okay, if we're talking about developer, if we're talking about empathy, if we're talking about communication, these are some of the things that we're referencing. So it gives us a common vocabulary, a deeper understanding about how we're wired. Tom talks about design, how we're designed, how God has put us together. To get a deeper understanding of that, to sort of look at the questions of, why do we see things the way we do? If you are a deliberative, and I'm going to talk about this in a minute, if you're a deliberative, you see things very differently from someone who has the activator strength. It's a very different way of looking at the world. And so you get a sense of why you look at things that way, but also you get an appreciation that this actually is a strength. I look at the world this way because it's a strength. It's not a liability. It highlights your uniqueness. You are one, your particular profile is like one in multiple millions. And even people who have the same strengths, like we have 2 people who sent me their strengths and they both have empathy as number 1. But when they look at their whole profile, look at it as a whole, they'll see that their particular, the way that they use that strength, that empathy strength, is different from the way the other one would use it. So we're all very unique. And then it confirms things that you already knew or suspected. You're like, I'm like this. And I sort of realized that, but this really confirms it. So usually I do this with people standing up, but since we're all at our computers, we won't stand up. But I want you to think about this. So to think about how you're uniquely wired. So here are some things. Maybe you talk to people in elevators, airplanes, grocery stores, or wherever you go. So if this is you, stand up on the inside. I want to see you standing up on the inside if this is you. Or maybe you have a color-coded or otherwise organized closet. I can say, this is not me. In fact, if I can find anything in my closet, it's a miracle. But this is not me. But for some people, this is them. My father used to have all of his shoes completely lined up and, according to color and all of that. Maybe you write down a list of things to do and you stick to it. A lot of people write down lists, but few people stick to it. But maybe you're one of those kinds of people that does that. Maybe you like looking forward to the weekend and make a list of things to do on the weekends. Maybe you need to pick someone to race while driving. I wouldn't suggest that, but that may very well be so. Maybe you think about it. Maybe you don't actually do it, but maybe you think about it. When the person pulls up next to you, you're fantasizing about drag racing them. Maybe people say that you ask too many questions. I said, or so they say. They say that you ask too many questions. You're always probing. Or maybe you're the kind of person that pushes the button at the elevator to remind the elevator that you're there. I don't know. There are people like that, and you know who you are. You know who you are. You're just pushing that elevator button, okay? And people are all standing around saying, the elevator's coming. But or maybe I'm going to just move this to the side here. Maybe you love looking at manuals and instructions, or you love fixing things that are broken. Or you have a huge collection of blank that nobody else thinks is useful. My brother has a dear friend who has a huge collection of door stops, antique door stops. They fill his house. The guy's a millionaire, so he can afford to buy all these things. It fills his house, but who cares? but he does. And or maybe you're the person who's often a shoulder to cry on. So the fact is that those things that I describe really, before I go on, I just want to just check in with folks, okay? So do any of those things describe any of you? I see heads nodding. Debbie.
Yes.
Which one?
The shoulder to cry on.
Okay.
Definitely not the organization.
Oh.
Definitely not.
Okay. What about any of the others? People who like to fix things, or they talk to people in elevators, or.
I'm very likely to. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say I'm very likely to race people on my bike, and sometimes in my car too. But I try to avoid doing it in my car. But I'm pretty eager to do it on my bike.
Okay, that's great. Anybody else?
Yeah, I love things organized, nice and neatly, labeled, color coordinated. So, yeah.
That's definitely a specific kind of strength or talent.
I have to admit, there's a certain section in Dorchester on Blue Hill Ave that I have this thing that if I'm next to a car, I every single time I go to that section, I do imagine myself I'm drag racing with this person.
Okay.
When you said that, I'm like, oh my God, that's so crazy.
But it's not crazy. It's really kind of the way you're wired, and those things are not crazy things. Things like competition as a strength. I mean, that may not be in your top 5, but it might be in your top 10. And that's a strength. It's a strength to really be activated. So go ahead.
For me, if depending on my mood of the week, the effortlessly and instinctively starting conversations. So when I'm in a good mood, I'll be fairly loquacious and outgoing. If I'm in a bad mood, then I'm very quiet and withdrawn. So that's one thing. The other thing is the whole color-coded and organized. I like it when I'm in that. Like if someone else has done it and I'm receiving it, I like it, but I'm not, and so I aspire to it, but I'm not good at it. So I thought that was interesting. Like if I could dream myself, that would be a talent of mine, because disorganization drives me crazy. But the ability to organize my space is not intuitive or natural.
So and sometimes it's because sort of internally you're organized. You have an organized way of thinking, an organized way of processing, but you don't have that strength, or not necessarily that you don't have it, but you haven't activated a strength where you're the one who actually creates those kinds of systems. And so that's a great example of being able to partner with somebody, because you love having that kind of organized environment, but you're not the one that actually can create that space. So you find the person, you go to Kristen and say, please come organize my space so I can really be in this kind of environment that matches how I am internally. So everyone has a talent, a naturally recurring pattern of thought, feeling, or behavior that can be productively applied. And so some examples that we just finished kind of going over: effortlessly and instinctively starting conversations. Anthony mentioned that. Thinking in an orderly or timely manner, being able to easily influence others, seeing patterns in data, consistently having a positive outlook on life. These are actually talents that and gifts that God has given us to do what it is that He's called us to do. So, just a word about thinking about strengths and talents. So, you're wired with particular, as I mentioned, particular talents, but those are not necessarily mature strengths. Okay, a talent is something that you need to invest in. And that, as it mentions, it says time spent practicing, developing your skills, building your knowledge base. And when you put in that kind of investment, then that becomes a strength. And we're all in the process of our strengths becoming more and more mature. And actually, what the StrengthsFinder assessment does is it measures patterns of talents and puts those talents together in what they call themes or strengths. So maybe you have a talent for, thinking in an orderly fashion. You have a talent for always looking for the pitfalls of something, always troubleshooting. Maybe you have a talent for taking things slowly and looking at it very thoroughly. Well, then the strength that might pop up for you would be deliberative. That's the strength, but that strength is a collection of talents that you have. And then as you invest in doing stuff to strengthen those talents, they become, as it mentions down here, actual strengths. That's the ability to consistently provide near perfect performance. And of course, nobody's perfect, but it's when you do this thing, you realize, hey, when I do this, I'm effective. God really is blessing this. So we start with talent and we finish with strength. Just to say another word about that is that there's nothing wrong with being aware of your weaknesses. Some people say, well, you need to know your weaknesses so that you can really, strengthen those weaknesses. Well, it's true that we can't ignore our weaknesses or they'll trip us up. But it's not about staring at those weaknesses, because the greatest opportunity for success, as it says here, lies in building on our natural talents. And there are different ways to manage our weaknesses. We need to be aware of them, and we need to be aware of our blind spots. But the way to manage them is to really leverage and use your strengths. So I got a really quick exercise for us to do. And If you have, do you have something, everybody has something to write with?
Yes.
Okay, what I want you to do really quickly, if you don't have something to write with and something to write on, grab it really quickly. What I want you to do is I want you to write, I use my strengths every day. Just write it out twice, write it twice. I use my strengths every day. Just quickly, I want you to write that. Okay, now that you're done with that, because I'm assuming you're done, I want you to take your non-dominant hand. Your non-dominant hand. If you're right-handed, take your left hand. If you're left-handed, take your right hand. And I want you to do the same thing, right? I use my strengths every day. With your non-dominant hand. Okay. Hello. Hello.
Edwin, please mute your phone, everybody.
Because I had to go in and get it. Hold on.
Go ahead, Paul.
Okay, so I'm assuming that you finished writing. I'm assuming that you finished writing with your you're writing with your non-dominant hand. Now, someone, I want someone to just tell me what was the difference. Just unmute yourself and just tell me what was the difference.
Slow. Just so slow, and actually it felt like I was writing backwards.
Okay. Slow, and you're right, you feel like you're writing backwards.
I would tell you, Paulea, but I'm still writing.
Okay. All right. So if there may be someone in our group here who's ambidextrous and is like amazing with that, but most people actually find with their non-dominant hand it is very difficult. And what comes out is not at all legible. So if you had to write a message with that, it would not be very effective to get that message across. So it's why would we use that? Why would we use that non-dominant hand unless we had broken our dominant hand? But the fact is that you're wired to be able to use your right hand or your left hand if that's your dominant hand. That's the way you're wired. That's where your strength is. Why not use that to be effective? If you want to get a message across to somebody quickly, you would use the strong hand. And so that's one of the things about using your strengths that just illustrates this is a good thing. This is a good thing. This is the way that we're wired. And it takes so much more energy to use the non-dominant hand. That's the other piece. It takes so much more energy when God has really given you this particular way of writing and communication. So let me just go over a few more principles about these themes or strengths. First of all, they're neutral. They're not good or bad. None of these strengths have a value judgment attached to them. These strengths are not, or these themes are not labels. These themes, or another word from the strengths, they're not labels. So you are not Mr. Maximizer. You are not Ms. Empathy. You are not Mr. Deliberative. These things describe some of the ways in which you move through the world, but it does not label you a particular thing. We lead with positive intent, that this is about doing good and not doing harm. Differences are an advantage. The fact that we are all unique is a good thing. And it leads us to the last one, is that people need each other. We're like puzzle pieces, right? Where the places where we're not strong are places where we can connect with each other. Tom talks about that a lot when he's talking about discovering our design, and the good news being that we can be, all of who we are, and that can be bad news in the sense that we can't be anybody else. But then the good news is that that's a way that we can connect to other people. So. And just a quick word about these strengths or themes being neutral. Sometimes when people get their profile back, they look at particular strengths and say, wow, that really sounds lame. That's not something that I really appreciate. So in looking at Tom's profile, not that Tom was one of those people that said that his strengths were lame. But he had two things in there that I've heard people really struggle with, and one is significance. And people who have the significance strength, they want to do stuff that matters, and they want other people to recognize that it matters. They want to make a difference, and so some people look at that and they think, oh wow, that's I'm just trying to get attention. That's just so lame. But that's not what significance is about. It really is about this place of moving through the world in a way that actually makes an impact. And that's what you're trying to do. And another one of his strengths is self-assurance. So people can look at that and say, oh, wow, that person, that means I'm just, I'm arrogant, I'm cocky. Well, it could mean that, but it doesn't necessarily have to mean that. It means that you believe in yourself and your abilities, and you are able to take risks because you believe that things are going to turn out all right. And that's a particular strength that certain people have that they move through the world with. And so those are ways that those things are neutral. They're not good or bad. They're just strengths that God's given to be able to be effective. And people with significance and self-assurance in their profile often are people who step into high-profile leadership positions because they have that kind of, those kinds of strengths operating in their lives. So, but they're not good or bad. So a scripture that Tom talks about a lot, and which is, I think, just very meaningful for our conversation, is this one from Ephesians 2:10, and this is the Voice, which is one of my favorite versions. It says, "We are a product of His hand, heaven's poetry etched on lives, created in the anointed Jesus to accomplish the good works God arranged long ago." Another translation says, "We are His workmanship," or "we are His masterpiece." The fact that God created us in a particular way with particular strengths, so that we would bless the world, and we would be a blessing also to ourselves. And these are the good works that God's arranged for us. And this is why it's important to sort of walk in that so that we can accomplish these good works. Thomas Edison said, if we all did things we are really capable of doing, we would literally astound ourselves. And God really can use us to change the world. So let's jump into our impressions about our profiles. So those of you who read your profiles, I wanted to just hear from people. What was your first impression of your top 5? And did any part of your report surprise you? So I just want to jump into that question. What was your first impression, and did any part of the report surprise you?
Yes, this is Edwin. The profile did not surprise me. It was right on point. The thing that I'm looking at is, as I read some other things of a little more depth and everything, how I need to really study more the profile, be able to identify the specific, along with my roles and how all of this ties in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Edwin, could you share with us your top 5?
No. Oh, no, I'm just kidding.
Okay.
One was strategic thinking, arranger, executing, context, strategic thinking, individualization, relationship building, and learner, strategic thinking.
Okay, so it was the first one was strategic.
Yes.
And then it was arranger.
Right, and then context,
Mm.
and then individualization,
Mhm.
and learner.
Okay, wow, that's great.
That sounds like a perfect picture of you, Edwin.
Yeah, I know. I'm you know, Tom is getting upset with these assessments picking me out, man.
That's great. So we're gonna dive into that a little bit more deeply in a minute. But anybody else share your top 5 quickly, and what your first impression, or did it surprise you?
I have my top 5.
Okay.
I have learner, input, arranger, individualization, and responsibility. And what surprised me a lot was the input. It says you collect things, and that is so me. I collect things. I don't know why. The one that I don't want to be, I don't know. I don't like this one is responsibility. It's just too intense. So I would not. I need to work on eliminating that one.
Sorry, Marinelle. Can do. But the great thing about responsibility, when it's obviously when it's managed well, is that you're the person that if you say, I'm going to do this, I'm going to make this happen, you're that person that people can trust, that people say, okay, well, you know what, we know Marinelle said she was going to do it. We know that thing is going to get done. But the flip side of that is that you have to be careful not to overcommit, because since you're the kind of person that's going to like jump in there and just stay up all night and all day or whatever and get it done, you can easily overtax yourself. So to really manage that, you have to just be careful and mindful about, what you commit yourself to. And I think too about that this whole process of getting clear and getting focused and all that will help that. It will help you better determine, okay, what are the things that I really am, I really do want to use my responsibility strength for? What are those things? And what are the things that I need to kind of prune from my life? And also with people with that responsibility strength need to focus too on self-care. You'll run yourself ragged. And so you need to be able to have particular things put in place so that you can really care for yourself.
Paulea, let me encourage people, if you're interested, you could go down to the bottom of your screen into the chat section. You could write your 5 strengths on there and just make it visible for everybody. Or you could just make it visible to Paulea, but she won't be able to look at it really because she's focusing on what she's doing. So if you make it visible to everybody, at least I can also be able to see it and others can too. So you can use the chat to do that.
That would be great. That would be great.
Paulea, I had one question that came up. There are a lot of questions where both options really described you. Mm-hmm. And they didn't kind of provide an instruction on what to do in that situation. So, I just split the difference and put neutral. But then I just, the paranoid side of me is like, do I trust this? Because there was something that really described me that I did it, that wasn't captured because it wasn't like opposites. It was like, for example, one of them was I like lectures. I like discussion groups. I mean, let's say you really like both, and so you just put neutral. I felt like it's not capturing that side of you. So they weren't like opposites. It's not like, you know, I like to be physically active and I like to be sedentary. So I'm just curious what your thoughts are in those cases.
Well, my question goes back to how you felt about the assessment. Did you feel like it captured who you are, or did you have questions, or were there things that surprised you?
No, I did. I was surprised by the first number one was context. If you enjoy thinking about the past, you understand the present by researching its history. So I think that certainly does describe me. I was just surprised it was number one. I mean, my top 5 were context, connectedness, learner, harmony, and belief. And they all, I mean, none of them, what I would say, doesn't describe me. I didn't necessarily think context was my first, but that's how it was.
So I guess my answer to your question is that I think that the assessment and you know, there's a way I think to go into more of the kind of research behind it, but I think the assessment is created in a way that your answers to those questions get factored in to how, like those neutral answers get factored in to how they determine what your strengths and, you know, what your strengths are. So I know when I took the assessment, I mean, first of all, it's timed, so I'm going crazy because it's so hard for me to make a decision. That's one of my problems. And so I'm just like, this, you know, this can't possibly describe me because I don't even know how I'm answering these questions. But indeed, when it came back, it was very, very accurate. So I think that somehow they factor in those neutral questions, neutral answers, along with the ones that you actually chose, one or the other. So that's what I would think about it. And I can maybe get some more information about the kind of the science behind the actual assessment, but I think they factor those neutral answers in. And I want to say something about context in a minute, because you had context and then somebody else did too, had context. So I do want to mention something about that. Okay, so let's move on. I definitely want to move on. Okay, so let me quickly go over this little tool, name it, claim it, and aim it. And so I'm just going to jump to this little exercise here. So what I want you to do is I want you to take a few minutes, and because of just the time that we have, I want you to just read. Let's connect the name it and the claim it. So I want you to read your top 2 strengths. Just read it on your page there, and I want you to highlight, either just make a mental note or you can underline it, the things that really pop out at you as you look at those strengths. So you know, you read your profile and then there's something that pops out and says, oh, that is really me. So I want you to just do that right now. And I also want you to claim it, which is for you to look at what of your top 5 strengths do you feel like really describes who you are, which of those top 5. So first I want you to look at the number 1. The top 2. We'll see how far we can get. The top 2. Of those top 2, I want you to just highlight or make a mental note of the things that best describe you. And then secondly, I want you to think about which of those top 5 are really, you know, you. Which really do you own? Okay? So let's just take about like 5 minutes and just do that really quickly. If I had some background music, I should play some music or something while we're doing that. So does everybody understand the instructions? Yes? Just give you a few minutes.
Oh, did you put the music?
You give light, you are love, you bring light to darkness, you give hope, you restore every heart that's broken. Great are you, Lord. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out praise. We pour out praise. It's your breath in our lungs, so we pour out praise to you only. I'm gonna give you one more minute. One of my minutes, which actually might be less than an actual minute. Okay. All right. So I'd love to hear from somebody. Just take, why don't we, for the sake of time, why don't you take one of those strengths that you highlighted and just share with us what things popped out at you? What things popped out?
Should I go, Paulea?
Yes, please.
Okay. My first for under intellection was delight. I circled delight in the opportunity to hear leading thinkers, thinking out loud about ideas, and that I spend a minimum of 5 hours a week in solitary thinking. Those are the three that popped out.
Wow. Wow. So that really describes who you are.
I think so, yeah. With the people I feel really comfortable with.
Could you just share with us the rest of your top 5?
Oh, sure. It's intellection, input, restorative, empathy, and developer.
That's great. Thank you. So, Kristen, which of those 5 do you really sort of own? Is intellection the one that you feel most kind of connected with?
I honestly felt like, yeah, I'm not surprised by the intellection aspect. That really, I think, would be number 1. And then I felt like developer and restorative kind of made sense to me, but I'm still not sure like what that means. So, and the others made sense too, but I felt like surprised by the developer and restorative.
Did you feel surprised because of, are there ways in which you see that in your relationships? Sort of developing?
Let's see. Well, I kind of highlighted for developer that I like to cultivate the potential in others. That absolutely describes me. But what surprised me was it said you may thrive when you have an opportunity to mentor. And that is true, but I guess I wouldn't find that to be like a strength in how that doesn't come natural. Even though it's in my heart, I don't feel like it's natural for me to be a speaker or feel like I have I don't know. I just don't know what the abilities are there yet. So just.
Well, I think that's a great example of how kind of finding ways to apply that in your life will then sort of strengthen your understanding of what those strengths mean. And I think the whole developer and restorative go together because the developer is, again, sort of that mentor kind of person. The restorative is, I've heard people say, that restorative, they like to fix things, but it's this sense of like, where's the pain? Where's the place? How can I kind of walk with you in that place of pain or discomfort so that I can help that to be fixed? And whether it's people or systems or whatever, it's how can I kind of fix that thing?
Yeah.
And the fact that your intellection is like your top, you're a person that spends a whole lot of time kind of thinking about things and being solitary. So you think, well, that means that I'm not really in the mentor type, but that actually, I think, prepares you to better kind of mentor and to better like address with people things that can be quote unquote fixed. So I think that your intellection really kind of, it makes the ground for that. So
I think I'm still trying to figure out how to connect those two, because on the inside I have so much, and I think getting outside of myself and actually functioning as a mentor, because I want to do that, but I think that I want to feel, I don't want to feel too overwhelmed by it.
Mm-hmm.
I need help. That's all I can say.
That may be a little broader thing than this particular little seminar.
Absolutely.
But you mix that intellection with input, and that's a lot that's going on in your head and gathering, and so it might be overloaded a lot.
Yeah, I do.
Paulea, you may want to move towards your domains, because that's pretty powerful for people to understand.
Okay. So I don't know why oh, there it goes. Okay. You want me to skip the,
You do whatever you want to do. I just think that you've got some good stuff there.
Okay. Well, let me first go to domains, and then I'm going to go to, we have a little bit of time. I'm going to go to a few of the profiles that I've gotten. So there are 4 domains of strengths, and as you see here, each one of the strengths that you have rests in one of these domains. So let me skip down to
you want to take a screenshot of that or a picture with your phone or something if you'd like, so because your different strengths may help you see where you kind of like line up in that sum.
Yeah. So as you see there's executing, people who have these themes, they know how to make things happen. They know how to get things done. And you see this list of strengths that fall in that category. Influencing, there are people who also know how to get things done, but they get things done sort of through people. They know how to take charge, speak up, and in a team context, they know how to make sure that the team is heard. So they influence people. The third is relationship building. They know how to build strong relationships. They're the folks that hold a team together. And it says here, makes the team greater than the sum of its parts. And you see this list down here. And the final one is strategic thinking. These collection of themes are people who they absorb, it says absorb and analyze information that can inform better decisions. So these folks, again, they're the strategic thinkers. So a lot of times people will have, they'll have strengths in 2 or 3 of these domains or quadrants. Some people have all four, but fewer people have all four domains represented, and some people have just one, and that's also okay. That's kind of your strengths are concentrated in a particular domain, and that's how God created you. That's how God made you. And just to remember that as we look at those strengths, they do give us clues and direction in terms of our purpose and just, how God wants to use us. There are folks, I did a workshop recently where there was a young man who had all of his strengths in relationship building. And it was very interesting just in terms of the whole kind of gender dynamic, because he was upset about that. He was like, what? I got all that in relationship building. Does that mean I'm soft? But really, this is how God made him. And that doesn't mean that this is a person who doesn't get things done or who doesn't have is not a strategic thinker, but it means in terms of his dominant strengths, these are the places where he can be most effective. And he can leverage some of these strengths in order to have other things, to execute things. He can leverage those things in order to get things done, in order to influence people, et cetera, et cetera. But all of his were concentrated on the relationship building. So just really quickly, to ask really quickly. So can someone just share really quickly how many domains their strengths are in as they look at this chart? How many domains are they in?
Again, it'd be awesome if you put that in the chat, because I can then take a picture of that. We can have a little future understanding. For me, I have 4 in one area and 1 in another area.
Which area is the 4?
Influencing.
Oh, surprise, surprise.
I have 2 in strategic thinking, 2 in relationship building, and 1 in executing. The irony is my whole job is in influencing. I mean, I'm giving talks to, hundreds of people. So it's ironic because that's what people know me for, but I have no strengths in that. So I think I have to get out of the lecture circuit.
But your lecture stuff is about really relationship building, right? I mean, you are building relationships with the people who you're lecturing, and that's where you influence. That's your place of influence, really.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, that's your place of influence. Anybody else?
I'll just say that I would say pretty much everything under relationship building, and then it would go to strategic thinking. There's a few there, and then executing, but no influencing.
Well, the question is, Kristen, in your top 5, which category are they in?
Relationship building. I would say, I guess that would go under developing, a developer.
Yeah, developer is relationship building. Yeah.
I feel like that's where I would see that manifesting.
And then you also have a intellection, right? So you're in strategic thinking.
Yeah. And then executing, there's a few words that really stick out there.
But what we're talking about is your top 5, where they land on that chart.
Oh, where do they land on? The analytical would probably, the strategic thinking probably would be more the input.
It's listed right there. It's just listed. You don't have to have guesswork. You got it.
Yeah, intellection, and then input, or no?
Input is there.
Am I missing something?
Yeah, your top 5 are intellection, input, restorative, empathy, and development. So it's just right. Where are those on the chart right there?
Oh.
So that you can just see that.
Okay, I think strategic thinking, relationship building.
So you have one quadrant here, strategic thinking, you have intellection and input. In relationship building, you have developer, right? And in executing, you have restorative. And what was the last one?
Her final one is, again, she has
Empathy.
yeah, relationship. Is the biggest.
Yeah, empathy and developer.
Okay.
I'm a little lost here, but I do see it. I'm seeing those words stick out now. Sorry.
Okay.
I went about it the wrong way.
So, right. So, again, we have these 4 quadrants, and we have the top 5 that we have are somewhere listed on these in these quadrants.
Okay.
So your top 5 strengths will fall somewhere.
Okay, I'm seeing that.
I know we only have a little bit of time left, but I wanted to let me just open it for questions, because we only have a little bit of time left, and I want to honor the time. And I will say this though. Well, let me just keep going. We're gonna go for some questions. Before we do the questions, I want to just say really quickly here some resources. So the actual Clifton Strengths website is to go on that dashboard. Each of you who took the StrengthsFinder assessment, they send you the information, and there's a dashboard. And on that dashboard, you can find not only a description of your strengths, but also a list of actions, kind of like action steps that you can take. It also talks about dealing with your blind spots. All this is great information. So really go, it also has like little videos of people talking about these strengths. So I would really suggest go on there. It looks like the site is down right now, but I think they're doing some maintenance on the site. But when the site comes back up, really go in there and take a look at, really browse, look around inside that, in your dashboard. There's also a site that I found that I thought was fantastic. It's called Strength School. And it actually is a group that's in Singapore, but their website is really helpful. It has a blog about different insights about strengths. It has the description of the strengths, which is really great. There's all kinds of resources on that site. So Strength School, there's the website for that. There's the book. This is one book. There's many, many books about strengths, but there's one in particular. There's Now Discover Your Strengths, Marcus Buckingham. He has, I think, an updated version of this book. This is another way of kind of looking at strength-based of strength-based living, a strength-based approach to living. And then the last thing is to get a coach. Because a coach can really help you as an individual. I think about Kristen, the things you say, I need help, that whole sense of, going deeper with you as an individual. Just to say, I am available to do that with folks. I'm a certified strengths coach, and I would be happy to work with people. And the folks who are in our 90-day our 90-day cohort, I would give a special rate to if you come and contact me. So I'm also available for coaching. But on the StrengthsFinder site, they also have a section where it says find a coach. So if you want to, you're not in Boston, or it doesn't even matter where you are. If you want to find a particular coach and match up, you can find that information too on the StrengthsFinder site. Okay. So any other questions, really quick, before we close?
This is Edwin.
Yeah.
One question: when we respond neutral, could it be that we're wired to be balanced, and it shows our adaptability or flexibility to be able to deal in various environments at certain times?
Well, it could show that, but there are also certain strengths that either deliberative or analytical or, some strengths, in particularly in the strategic thinking category, that they're so sort of analytical about the way in which they're approaching the test, not the test, but the assessment, that they don't want to make a decision. They don't want to make a decision, or it's harder for them to make a decision one way or the other, because they're looking at like every possibility and every, they're really looking at it in that kind of way. So it could show that you're balanced, or it could show that you're looking with such detail at the decision that you're just not really ready to make a decision. So it could be any of those things.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Paulea, you want to maybe stop sharing your PowerPoint, and you can see everything for the last couple minutes.
Okay, now stop share. Oh,
Perfect.
wow.
Look at you go.
Yeah, wow. I can see everybody. This is great. Any other questions?
Paulea, I'd be interested in just sort of anecdotally, whether from Tom or yourself, whether you have seen, like how you have seen this actually take you in a direction that you would not have gone otherwise, with the reaping of, the reward of being in God's, sort of design for you. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, I was doing X, I took this, I found out Y, and now I'm doing this, and holy moly. Like, anecdotally, if you've heard of or you've experienced that yourself.
Yeah. So I can kind of add on to my story that I shared earlier. And this is something that's like, Tom, you can obviously share as well, but this is something that's like right off the presses for me.
Empathy. You have an empathy thing going on.
Yeah, right, but I don't. But I really don't. But anyway, is that I always thought of myself as a program director. That was the thing that that was like my thing. And, I like kind of developing programs and all that kind of stuff. And I really thought that was more of the direction that I would have wanted to go in. And in fact, I took a job as a program director and I kind of enjoyed it. But I will say that the looking deeper at my strengths connected with this whole process with Tom around more fully embracing my shape, that whole exercise has really helped me to think, okay, you know what? That whole piece of ideation, developer, activator, that piece, this is the direction I really want to go into now. That whole program director thing is great. It's wonderful. It can be a tool for something, but that is not, even though I think, that's so cool to be a program director, that's not really the focus of my direction right now. And so I have seen how the strengths, as well as, the other conversations that we've had in this whole process, has helped me shift my direction. It's really helped me. It really has helped me. Yeah.
So I think it can help directionally. It also really helps, and this is not what we're doing so much, of where you function within a team or a corporation or something like that. So we did this a number of years ago with 10 people from the leadership of the church. And when we put up the 4 domains, that influencing section, there was no one else in that, and I'm almost all there. And I felt totally exposed and like vulnerable. I felt like the used car salesman is really embarrassing. And so I wanted to leave right at that moment because everybody else was scattered all around and balanced. And I'm like, this one thing. And then somebody said, good thing we have you. Mm-hmm. It was just like, was really helpful for me to know. But knowing those things also lets me know where in the process of the development of a program or a direction or a company where you fit in that process.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that can be really big. And so you wonder why most of the meetings you're not really involved in. You know, you're checked out until it comes to your moment. Or once it gets past your thing, you don't care anymore. You know, so it helps to know who to bring to the table when or where, I think, too.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else have, was that helpful, Anthony?
Yeah, I mean, it's just inspiring to, you know, invest time into really exploring this, because it actually has impact. It's not just theoretical.
Yeah.
I love those 3 words of naming it, claiming it, and aiming it. You know, so owning it is the whole thing of what our course really is about. You know, ultimately it is to understand, but owning it is the claiming it, saying, I'm going to be responsible to invest my life. And this thing can really help along those ways.
Mm-hmm. And just to say too, that the aiming it is, you know, we didn't really talk a lot about that, but that is really important, because that, I would really like challenge folks to look at one thing that you can do in the next, you know, the thing says starting tomorrow, but let's just say, you know, in the next week, one thing that you can do to intentionally use one of those, one of your top 5, and then to really think about what results, how did that impact people around me, what happened as a result of that. So, you know, to reflect, you know, Tom talks a lot about us reflecting, to really reflect on that. Think of one thing you can do with one of your top 5 where you can intentionally use that strength. So just to say a quick word, so we're going to end now, but I had done some thinking about folks who had sent me their strengths. I had done some thinking about their top 2 and kind of how they, you know, how they might relate to one another. So what I'll do is, one thing, you know, I'll just shoot you a quick, the people that sent it to me, I'll shoot you just a quick email that just gives a little bit of my thoughts about it. And then, you know, if you want to kind of, you know, pursue a conversation about a coaching session, that's fine. If you don't, that's fine as well. But I just want to just share with you just a couple of my thoughts that, you know, since I had kind of prepared that, I'd share that with you. If you sent something to me like within the last couple of days, I'll send that to you. I don't mind that at all. And again, if you want to pursue deeper, we can talk about that. If not, that's also fine.
I think too, and Paulea, you can tell me if this is true, you know, there's a reason why they do the top 5. The order of them is not like the top 1 doesn't mean that's like your thing. Like you brought up, Anthony, you're taking the test, you're trying to figure out what's going on. But in the 5, there's going to be some that particularly stick out to you. That, as Paulea said, you're highlighting it, you're like, that's me. Put your eggs in that basket. You know, it isn't in the report basket, it's in the self-revelation basket. And so Anthony did the long version. And so some of them, they could be 6, 7, and 8. Those are also really worth looking at. Just do the one and really see which ones describe you, so that you can then claim that thing. And it isn't all you have, but it will bring you satisfaction when you move and do that, I think.
Yeah. And then just one other quick word. Those of you who did all 34, I just want to caution you, encourage you, whatever. Don't take time staring at your bottom 5. Don't take time staring at that. Oh my gosh, I don't have any empathy. You know, I'm not empathetic. You know, don't do that, because first of all, those places are, like we said before, those places are where you need other people, where you need to connect with people who have those as their strengths. But it also is that you're effective using those top 5 to 10 strengths, not trying to shore up those bottom 5. So I mean, it's natural to look at the bottom 5 and lament, but but I just, encourage you to avoid that and just to invest in your top strengths.
How about if we all unmute ourselves and we give Paulea a hand as our closing? Thank you, Paulea. Thanks a lot, everybody. We'll be connecting tomorrow night if you're available. Is it tomorrow night? It is tomorrow night.
All right.
Yeah.
Have a great weekend. We'll talk soon.
All right.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.